Good evening. Welcome to our first session of the educational series on the Offshore Racing Congress, or the ORC, as we all kindly and shorthand it. My name is Kevin Foote. For those that don't know me, I am a longtime offshore sailor, racer, member of the Chicago Yacht Club, and actually this year I have the pleasure of serving as the vice chair of the Chicago Yacht Club Race to Mackinac. With our chairman, Win Soldani, who many of you know. If he and I don't make a complete mess of the race this year, we'll be back in those same positions next year, and we hope to see you out on Lake Michigan both this year and next. I'm happy to say tonight that we are joined by Jim Teeters, Chris Tutmark, and Sydney Howe from the U.S. Sailing Offshore Office. I think many of you know them or have dealt with them. Many of you have probably only dealt with them in an electronic format or submitting forms. So one of the goals tonight is to actually meet them virtually as it is. And the remaining goal is for us to all learn that much more about the offshore racing rule, measurements, and to make us all, in fact, better sailors and better users of the offshore racing rule. So with that, I'm going to ask Jim, Chris, and Sydney to come off of both mute and start up their video and to let them take things away. Just to get a few quick things out of the way, a couple of people have said chat is disabled, so we'll take a look at that. One last thing before I shut up and put myself on mute. The four of us and some other folks that have been involved in putting this together, I believe all agreed on many things, one of which is the more back and forth, the more interactive this is, the more you people ask questions during the presentation and not save it up to the end, I think the better it is, the more fun it is, and the more we're all going to learn from it. So please go ahead and put them out there. I'll be tracking them and I'll interrupt Jim, Sydney, and Chris at the appropriate times. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Take it away.
Good evening. This is Jim. Well, we're going to give an introduction. We're going to talk about ourselves a little bit. My name is Jim Teeters. I started working at U.S. Sailing in 2005 as the associate offshore director underneath Dan Nolan. Worked there until 2015, took a break, and then came back 3 years ago because the office had basically run out of staff. People were going off in different directions. So we had a lot of work to do. We hired Sydney shortly thereafter, and Chris maybe a month after Sydney. Chris is our head measurer, so he's taking a lot of other responsibilities. Sydney is many things, doing lots of things within the office to cover the whole gamut. We're going to give our individual backgrounds briefly, so I will start with myself. My background is math and physics. I have a master's degree at Stevens Institute with the intention of getting into yacht design, which I did. I had a career at Sparkman and Stevens for 17 years designing boats. The highlight for me was working on 5 America's Cup campaigns in performance analysis, performance prediction, basically the science of sailboat performance. I did that within the office as well as on the America's Cup, and that led me to get roped into working on the US IMS committee in 1988. And I was very heavily involved with both US Sailing, the ORC with the IMS rule, became a member of their International Technical Committee, and ultimately was director of research for both U.S. Sailing and the ORC. I left in 2005 because this country was going off into a different direction with handicap rules, and took on the job of ORR. So I wear multiple hats, and I do my best job to make sure I'm representing the correct hat wherever I am. With that, I'd like to just turn it over to Chris, who can describe a little bit of his own background.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Tutmark. I'm the head measurer at U.S. Sailing, and I've been at U.S. Sailing for about 2 years. Prior to that, I had a rigging company in the Pacific Northwest, was also a measurer there, did a whole variety of sailing. I've actually been really fortunate to been able to do a variety of stuff all over the world in a variety of boats. So, and I come with a diverse sailing background in that respect, and been just dove, fully into this position, and I've, dealt with, worked with a lot of you and getting you guys your rating certificates, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Hi, I'm Sydney Huff. I also started at US Sailing just about 2 years ago. I started right after I graduated from college. I specialized in mathematics and data science. Inside the office, I do a lot of certificate processing during the heavy, rating season, but I also am very involved in the data entry side of things. So all of the applications that you use to submit your data to us, I have built. So if you ever have any questions about that, I'm here. In terms of sailing, I grew up in Michigan and am a lifelong fan of both MAC races. I grew up chasing my dad up to the island as he raced the MAC race every year. And over the last several years, I've helped my family run the shore operations side of our family sailboat that does the MAC races. So since I started at US Sailing, I've also tried to get my own sea legs under me and sail a little bit more. And that's been a lot of fun over the last couple of years.
Well, I'm going to put a plug in right now that when we hired both of these people, we knew we were getting very capable, smart, and motivated workers. They far exceeded what I think we could have expected out of anyone. I'm extraordinarily pleased with their work ethic, their initiative. I know I'm giving a plug for the office, but you're getting service from the best people I can imagine you'd have. So I asked them to take as much initiative as possible, and I think we're going to have a lot of really good office work for you. So let's go on to the next slide. Why are we here? We're going to explain our role in offshore racing, give an overview of our services, explain what a VPP is and the science behind it, and move into really the meat of the program, which is provide guidance on how to obtain an ORC certificate and give you an overview of that. On much of this presentation in the beginning part, before that fourth bullet, we're going to kind of glide on through. There's going to be more material in this than I'm going to cover because we don't want to take time on things that we think are lesser priority for this evening. We do need to let you know all the things we do, so I will cover that. But like I said, we'll glide through it relatively quickly. And before I say anything else, a reason why we are here is to listen to you. I think we're providing good service. I know we can provide better service. Our surveys help us in that, and I'm expecting to get some good questions through the chat and maybe follow-ups later on via email. So Sydney, let's move on. The services fall into 4 big categories here. There's the rating handicap rules, IRC, ORC, ORR, PHRF, that's a lot of word salad, and Portsmouth Yardstick. We do custom scoring for various races if the regatta wants us to do that. Weather forecast scoring is a new one that we're not going to cover tonight, but that's something that we're providing on request. We handle sail numbers. This is an international system, so we abide by the standards that every other country does. And when you see a USA and a sail number on it, hopefully that's coming from our office. I'll be frank, there are some cases where that's not the case, so it is what it is. And we're involved with safety at sea. There's another department in US Sailing which really handles this, but these are courses which are required for racing offshore. A certain percentage of the crew has to have different kinds of courses. We take this safety very seriously. Okay, PHRF. I'm not going to go into this. We all know what PHRF, it's a very simple rule, a single number. Every dog has his day kind of rule because it's just a single number. So that distributes more trophies to people during the season, and presumably it all evens out over the course of a season and the best boat will win. I would just like to add on that PHRF is the entry system for offshore racing in this country. So U.S. Sailing is very committed to the health of this. We provide different kinds of services to them, and we are working on enhancing those services. And a lot of what the information we want to provide is how you move from PHRF on up to one of the measurement rules. This is an excerpt right here from our online red, white, and blue book, which is not really a book anymore. You can go onto our website, type in the class that you want, and you can get a listing of ratings across different fleets. This one goes from Duluth to Hawaii down to Southern California. You can see an extraordinarily wide range of ratings there, from a 147 to a 45. I have no comment on that, but maybe we can work on that. Let's go on to the next slide, Sydney. Offshore services. We're planning on selecting or creating another database in addition to the one that I just showed you, where all the standard boats configurations will be displayed for every class. So what's the length beam, draft, displacement, IJPE, sail information, just to help PHRF organizations rationalize their process. Portsmouth Yardstick, this is a single number rule also. It's targeted towards smaller boats. They tend to be one designs, and if they don't have enough boat of a given design, they race against each other with the handicap system. This is entirely numerical. There is no human factor like there is in PHRF coming up with a rating. It's a statistical analysis that requests race results be fed into it from the fleets that are using it. An algorithm works out relative ratings and comes up with that single number. I should point out that Portsmouth Yardstick is really owned by the Royal Yachting Association, and they have an online version, PY Online, which is also available. As right now, it's got limited US boats, so we are still maintaining the US version. Again, this is a feeder system for boats. It introduces them to the concept of one boat owing time to another boat, which can feed into PHRF or into the measurement rules. IRC, this is a single number rule. It's a measurement rule, became popular in 2005 into this country. When it was introduced, we had a large fleet. I don't know of any races that are doing this. We still provide services. If you're going off to the Caribbean 600 or any of the other, or is it 300? Or any of the other races going off to Europe, we do provide IRC certificates working with the RORC. Okay, let's talk about the ORC rule in brief. The ownership is the Offshore Racing Congress. They used to be the Offshore Racing Council. They've been in existence since
Chris, Chris, it's Kevin. If I can just jump in for one moment, we have a question from Nick Camino, and it's probably best to address here. Nick's asking, can the PHRF rating be derived from ORC? I have an ORC, but not a perf, and will likely need a perf for local racing.
I glossed over that a little bit. PHRF has always used printouts of IMS ratings, ORR ratings, ORC ratings. That red, white, and blue book I referred to is a pre-HRF, but we also at US Sailing produced an IMS ratings list. Both ORR and ORC have online certificates, which are being used right now. So, you know, it's up to the PERF committee what they want to do when they look at a VPP rule certificate. There are many. Your
local PERF committee.
Yeah, they can look and see, you know, what the VPP rules say about a particular boat. We have done studies for PHRF fleets and individuals in the past. I think the best method for an individual is to let us know who you race against in your class. If you don't like your perf rating, let us know who's in there. We can do a search on the VPP rules or people can do it now with all this information available, and just look at various ratings and look at the differences between the boats in that little class, your boat versus them, different rules, and come up with some integrated opinion as to where your boat should nestle in with those others. I think it's a very useful way of doing this.
I have to admit I have done that, but typically not after races I do well in, I'll admit. I think that should, so I think, Nick, that should cover it perhaps. If not, let me know.
Okay, the ORC is an internationally recognized rule. In some cases, it's the only handicap rule in the world with that status. It has quite a few committees. I won't go into that. One that I think is particularly pertinent to this group is there's an international technical committee. It's experts in the field of performance and design, sailors that have a lot of skill in the performance, the science of performance. Their responsibility is to maintain the ORC VPP. They have their own experience as sailors and designers. They also will take feedback from organizations like U.S. Sailing and other national authorities. So just be very clear right away that we encourage sailors to provide feedback to our office. Should be in an organized way. We don't have time to go into that right now, but if you want to do something, please get in touch with us. I'd like to point out that I have asked Chris to take really the lead in dealing with IRC, because my vision of our office is there is a primary responsibility that's distributed throughout us. So while I am the lead on ORR, Chris is ORC and IRC, and Sydney backs us up on everything. There's two types of certificates. There's an ORCI, which is measurement required, and that will be used, for example, for the World Championships coming up this fall, and current use in the past year is used for the faster boats. ORC Club measurement is optional. We have more boats using that. It's less expensive, easier to get into. We do have standards for the sister ship information that we use. Chris can go into that in some detail when we get into describing that rule. ORC is administered by U.S. Sailing's offshore office. So again, if you have questions, complaints, feedback, or whatever, please send them to us. Next. Okay, ORR. This is going to be brief because their focus tonight is not on ORR, but ORC. It's similar to ORC. Ownership is the Offshore Racing Association. It's used in North America. It's a VPP rule. It has a group called the Technical Advisory Committee. It also has full and partial measurement certificates administered by the U.S. Sailing Offshore Office as well. This is a special slide that Sydney put together, so I'm going to let her chime in and explain this one and the next one. Go ahead.
Okay, so who do we work with in terms of rules and authorities? The best way to think about it is U.S. Sailing is the go-between. So we work very closely with technical advisory groups such as the rating rule authorities, like Jim mentioned, ORC, ORR, IRC. And then more on the safety side and policy side, we work closely with World Sailing and those that kind of set the standard for safety development. For racing groups, we work really closely with sailors, as many of you know, and then yacht clubs and race organizers. And we act as that communication between the two groups, and we are the go-between person. In terms of data, how do we work with others? So when a boat owner wants a certificate under one of the 3 rating rules, they submit an application via the U.S. Sailing website to our office. U.S. Sailing measurers and sail measurers will submit any measurement data that they take of your boat to us directly. We feed it into the algorithms that ORC and ORR have authorized us to use, and then we generate your rating certificate using their algorithms. So that's kind of just a really high level, how does everybody fit together? Yeah.
So when we get into the next portion of this seminar, Sydney's going to go into those things in a little bit more detail. Okay, we're not going to spend a lot of time discussing how a VPP works. The intent of this is just to give you a little bit of insight in what's going on. If you get a PDF or whatever of this presentation, you can go back and look at some of the details.
So
even those
Jim,
details are high level. Yeah, Kevin.
Jim, while you're in there, Tim Profit has a question. I think it's a good topic to hit on. He said, I understand the role of PERF for local racing as an entry-level system, but why then support ORR, IRC, and ORC? Or wouldn't it be better to have a single VPP rule?
Well, I guess that depends on your viewpoint on this. We could talk for the next hour about this. I will give you my viewpoint that U.S. Sailing made a decision in 2005 that they would not own a rule, and they had owned rules in the past or market or develop. But it's an open market, and they would administer whatever rule sailors wanted. So my feeling on that personally is that the U.S. is an open market. I think at our heart, starting in 1776, we are all anarchists. We don't like people telling us what to do. And I think an open market like this, even though it causes a little bit of chaos, it gives people the option to try things. It forces rules through competition to improve themselves and respond to their clients. And if things want to coalesce around a single rule, then they will.
So basically, the outlook being let, the three VPPs compete with each other.
Well, there's two VPPs. IRC is not really active, and it's a formulaic measurement rule, but I guess if you broaden the question to three measurement rules, yes. Well, IRC lost its market share because people chose something else. So I think that's this free market at work. And I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to be down the road, but you sailors and organizers, you get to make that decision. Okay, we're just going to talk about VPPs. ORC and ORR come from a common heritage. Briefly, here's that heritage. MHS rule was launched in 1978 for the Newport Bermuda race. It was a U.S. sailing and U.S. sailor creation. The Pratt project, Irving Pratt donated a big chunk of money, and the entire project was $500,000 in 1978 dollars. I'm not going to project what that means now, but I would guess it's going to be several $1,000,000. So MIT created the VPP. They created a wanding system for measuring boats, and the rule was up and running as a alternative to IOR. 1987, the MH rule was given to ORC to become IMS, International Measurement System. So it went beyond the borders of this country to become a very widespread international rule. In 2004, the ORR replaced IMS in this country, in the US. And then in 2009, we had a reintroduction of ORCI and ORC Club. So IMS, as a rule, morphed into becoming ORCI and ORC Club. And as of 2022, 2023, the US ORC fleet is the fastest growing fleet in the world. So I think we have kudos to those who have been working on developing this rule and marketing it in this country. Okay, what is a VPP, a velocity prediction program? It's a numerical representation of the science of sailing yacht performance. I want to stop reading that, and let's just go on to the next slide, and I will just talk ad hoc on that. So a VPP it embodies the physics, and this is really just high school physics, of the performance of a sailboat. Drive equals drag is one of those balances. You can see there's a green arrow in the diagram, which is the drive of the sails. Drive is in the direction the boat's traveling through the water. Drag is the opposing resistance. When you sheet in your sails, off the starting line, if you're a dinghy, you accelerate until the drag increases to be equal and opposite to the drive, and the boat is then at a constant speed. There's another balance going on at the side force on the sails and the rigging and the hulls, for that matter, from the wind is equal and opposite to the lift on the keel and the rudder, and there is some lift on the hull. So the boat, if it has reached equilibration at a constant speed, those forces have to be equal and opposite to each other. Okay, those side forces on lift, because one is up in the air in the rig and the other is underneath the water, one tends to heel the boat over, and actually the couple of them tends to heel the boat over, and that's counterbalanced by the innate stability of the boat, or the effect of the crew on a boat that doesn't have a lot of stability. So the heeling moment and the riding moment will also be equal in balance. There are other moments like yaw, which is whether the boat wants to go to turn to port or turn to starboard, and pitch balance is whether the bow goes up and down. Those are not really modeled explicitly inside the VPP. We don't do that. There are algorithms in the VPPs to deal with how well a boat can tack, but we don't explicitly do a yaw balance. So the data necessary for a VPP, we need the hull and appendage hydrodynamics. It's the lift and drag and stability that just referred to. We need rig aerodynamics, same as the ones that were just shown on a previous slide. And we need the environmental conditions of wind and waves. Next slide. Here's an example of a primary source of the hydrodynamics. It's a towing tank model. We fix the boat in some degree of orientation. It's free to pitch, free to heave, which is up and down motion. We push it through the tank and we measure forces and moments. Here is a numerical towing tank. This is an image from a panel code written by David Egan called Flow Logic. There are other codes much more complex called RANS codes, which include effects of viscosity. You can see the wave that has been created here. The energy that is lost going into creating that wave is the drag of the boat. So again, we can get computational fluid dynamics to support tank testing. This is a picture of a wind tunnel. This is a program that Robert Ronsenbach ran with my assistants for IMS rule 20 years ago at the Glen Martin wind tunnel. We had a series of sails we put in and measured the forces. There are wind tunnels in Southampton University and in Italy that have been used also to support, in particular, the ORC rule as well as ORR. Here's an example of a computational code, another panel program, which is use of vortex lattice called S2KV, which can be used to analyze upwind sails. Next. Okay, this is a black box of the VPP. I am absolutely not going to go into this in any detail. I just want you to know that the VPP does an iterative cycle to converge on that equilibrium solution by playing with different variables. You fix the wind speed and the wind angle, but you need to iterate the boat speed, the heel angle, and there are some sail manipulations to depower the boat if in fact your boat is faster with a flattened sail or a twisted sail or reduced sail area. In the end, we reach equilibration and we print out the boat speed at that particular wind speed and wind angle. Here's an example of the output of a VPP. So it's a table. Each column is a wind speed. This one goes from 6, 8, 10 on up to 20 knots. And then vertically, we're showing different angles. So on the far left, you can see there's the beat angle. So that's the optimum angle for sailing upwind. The beat VMG, that's not the boat speed. That's the boat speed made good. So that's the component of your boat speed that's going straight up in the wind. And at 52 degrees, for example, and 6 knots, you can see a boat speed of 7.18 knots. We go down through various angles, down to run VMG of 4.59 knots. Again, that's not the boat speed. That's the component of your boat speed that's going directly downwind. You are driving at an angle of 142.6. Okay, I don't think this is any mystery to you. Let's next go. We have a polar diagram. This is a ORC speed guide. If we just look at the right-hand side of this, this is an overhead view of the world. The wind can be perceived as coming down from the top. You see there's an arrow under the acronym TWA. So the wind is moving down. Each of those slanted lines radiating from the center is an angle of sailing to the wind. So you can see there's a line for 15 degrees, which no one can do with a boat. 30 degrees, this boat will not do that. 45, 60, and on all the way around to 180. The boat speeds we saw as a table in the previous graph are shown here as a family of curves. So for each wind speed, we have various curves. They're in different colors, so there's a guide down at the bottom. So this particular boat, a Santa Cruz 52 called Madcap, has a headsail set flying, which you can see in the light air is the optimum sail. So that amber curve, which is closest to the center, is the 6-knot curve. So the optimum angle is somewhere between 35 and 45. And you can see the curve as you go off to different wider angles all the way down to 120, and somewhere around 130, it transitions into the red curve. And looking down, that's your asymmetric on centerline. So there's a family of curves there. If we go to higher wind speeds, well up higher, you can see the blue curve, which is the headsail, not the headsail set flying, but a smaller one, becomes the optimum sail for sailing upwind all the way down to about beam reaching, where the headsail set flying now is the choice. And then it transitions into the asymmetric on centerline at the deepest angles. So these kinds of graphs are very useful to you. You can have these on board printed out. You can take special note of what the optimum angles are, particularly downwind, where people tend to hunt around for that angle. This will give you a reasonable guess at the targets. I think we have a question from John, so I don't know if Kevin, if you want to handle that, or we'll just turn this right over to Sydney for the next part.
Yeah, why don't you just take it while we have it. Our target boat speeds and pullers issued with both ORC rating types. And by both ORC rating types, I'm assuming, John, you mean an ORCI and an ORC and a club certificate. Let me know if that's not what you meant.
The brief answer is yes. We sell them for $35. Be happy to sell as many as you want, and for many variations as you want. I think Sydney's going to be covering this later.
Yeah, just those that haven't seen one before, your ORC certificate contains, a somewhat abbreviated table of pullers for your reference, and then you can, for $35 now, you can buy the full, you get the upgrade, you get the simonizing and everything.
I'd like to point out for those of you who have your boats instrumented, when you buy this speed guide, you can also get files that are read by Expedition and other programs. So you'll have your pullers on your instruments, so you get kind of that performance feedback that you're probably used to.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about how do you actually obtain your certificate. So as Jim mentioned earlier, ORC has essentially two product lines. ORC Club, this is measurement optional, where we don't have verified measurements of your actual boat. Our office will fill in with sister ship data. So we have kind of a set of base boats internally in the office that we deem, a good starting point for that class of boat, and that's what we'll use to build your certificate off of. If you were to submit measurements and you were getting an ORC Club certificate, of course, we would incorporate them into your certificate. For ORC Club, all of your sails are required to be measured. There is a list of what sails need to be reported. That will be covered in much more detail in the second session that's scheduled for this. And if you ever have any questions about it, it's on our website, and feel free to reach out to us if you want to talk about anything along those lines. The other product line is ORC International. That's a complete measurement set is required by a U.S. sailing recognized measurer. So that includes flotation measurements to get the displacement of the boat, inclining tests, a full set of rig measurements, hull and appendages, and your prop measurements. The other component of this that needs to be approved is the offset file. So an offset file is a 3D digital hull model of the boat. So imagine we scan the exterior hull of your boat and then we slice it like a loaf of bread. That is an offset file. And there is a set list of offset files that ORC has approved for international use. Again, we'll talk more about that in the second section that's geared just towards measurement and data entry. Again, under ORC International, all your sales have to be measured if they're reported on the certificate. So internally, when you go, or I guess in the office, we have 4 types of transactions that we handle in the office that we can run for you. The first is called a new certificate. So this is any boat that has never received a certificate under one of the rating pools, or, you know, it's been 10 years since the boat has received a certificate. We would consider that a new certificate in our system. The next is a renewal certificate. This is what most people receive every year. Each year you have to renew your certificate and get the latest year's version of the certificate. ORC updates their algorithm, their VPP, so does ORR. And so each year you need your certificate, you have to renew it. Amendments are if you receive a certificate in 2024. So if we issue you a certificate on May 1 and June 17th, you're doing a race and you want a different crew weight, we would consider that an amendment. There is a small fee to make that amendment change, but any configuration change is considered an amendment. We'll go into a little more detail of what triggers an amendment later on. The fourth type of transaction is called a trial certificate. These are purely test certificates. They are not valid for racing. Under ORC, you have 2 options for a trial certificate. We can run the trial certificate for you in-house for a fee. Those fees are listed on our website. Alternatively, you can run a trial certificate yourself through a service that ORC provides called Sailor Services. Sailor Services is free to sign up for. However, there is a small fee to run those test certificates. If you want to learn more about that, that is on ORC's website.
Sydney, if I can just jump in with 2 quick questions right away, and also for Sailor Services for a moment. It's if anybody hasn't created a login, you can do so. Running a test certificate is super easy, and when you talk about things that you might be doing an amendment for during the year, you can in fact sort of test it out yourself in advance. But if a boat is not from Joe, if a boat is not measured for ORC, where does the offset file come from?
That's a good question. So we have, just like we have sister ship data for boats, we have offset files for different types of boats. So we have, you know, a standard J120 that we use. If we have a boat that has a shoal keel, or, you know, a different one of the standard ones that come out of the factory, we have a lot of those on file. If it were a custom boat or a one-off boat, we have some options to generate offset files. But right now, ORC's kind of standard practice, if you wanted to get an international certificate, is you would have your boat scanned. And I think the plan is to go into far more detail on all of that in terms of offset generation in the next section, just because there is a lot of detail and a lot of interesting things to learn about. So,
and then from Clark, can an ORZ EZ certificate, pardon me, be used to create an ORC club certificate?
Why don't I help?
Yeah.
On this? Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. and we do that on a regular basis. There are a lot of offset files in the ORR EZ world that we've transported over. In fact, both rating authorities have a history of sharing offsets files from each other, and that continues that kind of collaboration. So, for instance, the Bayview fleet shifted from EZ to Club, and a number of those boats had offset files built specifically through the EZ process, and we just transfer those right over to Club.
And then other than, pardon me for a second, other than the other standard information that you're going to need anyway, sail measurements, weights, et cetera, there's nothing else that you would need to generate, is there?
I don't believe so. We will talk about like the items that are required for your application. And in that second kind of bucket or presentation, we go into a lot of detail of what data you should bring to the table. But I think most of it is actually on my next slide. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so no matter what transaction, no matter which of those 4 transactions you are doing, all applications are required or need these items. So the owner of the boat must be a valid U.S. sailing member. We'd like to make or point out that it shouldn't really be the boat representative. It should be the owner themselves of the boat. Should be the U.S. sailing member. So you will need your member ID when you apply. It's always good to know what type of certificate you need going into the application process. Some regattas, and the Chicago Mac is one of them, have a cutoff of when you need, of which boats need ORC Club and which boats need ORCI. A great place to look for that is in the NORs of the regatta itself. And just read up on, do you need a club or do you need an I? And know that information before coming to the application. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to look at the NOR and read it and help you understand. It's always good to have all the information regarding any changes made to the boat, rig, sails, hull, appendages. So that includes your keel, your rudder, any changes that you've made to the boat. Know them, have the information on hand, and bring that to your application, process when you sit down to the computer. Know what your maximum crew weight is. I will talk more about crew weight on the next slide. So if you have questions, just give me 1 second till we get to the next one. The name and date of the regatta that you'll need the certificate for, and then if you want to purchase the ORC speed guide from us, because you will be asked at the end of the application. Okay, so for crew weight, ORC lists 2 crew weights on the certificate. They list their maximum crew weight, and then they list a minimum crew weight. And this year, they are implementing that the minimum crew weight is calculated as 85% of your maximum, or if your maximum crew weight is 560 kilograms or less, your minimum crew weight is your max minus 85 kilos. How do you get to your maximum crew weight? You have 2 options. You can take the default crew weight. The default is calculated by the VPP. It is set by the type of boat and the calculation that's happening in the VPP. I believe it is LOA driven in ORC. Or an owner can declare their maximum crew weight. That is your other option. You'll need to know going into your application, are you going to take a default or declare a maximum crew weight? We strongly recommend declaring a maximum crew weight because it's something that you can control of the data going into the certificate. To be in compliance with your certificate, the total weight of crew on board of the boat while sailing needs to fall between the minimum crew weight and the maximum crew weight listed on the certificate. We would also recommend, just double checking the NORs and items like that when it comes to crew weight. So we are releasing an improved version of our application. At the end of the 2023 season, we took a survey from our members and we found that our application was long and it was a little slow. So we took your comments to heart and we have reformatted it into a hopefully better application system. The application has been reformatted so you don't have to retype as much data as long as it's already on file here at US Sailing. We have shortened the application, so those that are renewing with little to no changes can get in and out of the application process relatively quickly. And submit, if you do have changes, submitting those changes has become easier. We've also implemented automatic next step emails to provide a smoother and more seamless application process so you know what your next steps are inside of the application. The big change this year is we are implementing a system called a boat ID. So all boats will be assigned a unique alphanumeric ID, and this will become a tracking system to track the boat through US Sailing's database. Our office is in the process of building an offshore database to track all of our boat data, and this is the first step in that process, is assigning each boat an ID. If your boat received an ORC or ORR certificate in 2022 or 2023, you will receive an email next week with your boat ID. And that will kind of be your key into the application system this year. It removes your need to retype data, such as the name of the boat, the sail number, the class of the boat. Yeah, we're gonna walk through an application, so hopefully it doesn't feel too overwhelming. Okay, so boats that have been rated in 22 or 23, like I said, next week the owner will receive a boat ID via email from our office. You will then use the certificate or the application called the 2024 certificate application that is on our website on the ORC page. You will apply for a renewal just as you did last year or the year before. If your boat has not been rated ever or was not rated in 22 or 23, so if you were rated in 2020 but haven't received a certificate since, you will not receive a boat ID via email. So you will fill out the application called the new boat application. And once you submit that, we will send you a boat ID. And you'll be in our system and it will pre-populate your data from there on forward. I do see a question from Dobbs. Dobbs, I do believe I corrected that it can run in Safari. The application has far less coding in it this year. So it should run in all browsers. And overall, it just processes a lot faster this year. So, okay. So let's let's walk through an application for a boat that has a boat ID. So this is for people that received a certificate in 22 or 23 under ORR or ORC. Okay. So you're going to start on the US Sailing Offshore ORC page. You get there by going to this competition and then under offshore and under rating rules, and you click on ORC. So now that I'm on the ORC page, I would like to make a small disclaimer. The 2024 application is not going live until very early next week. So when you get your email, that's when with your boat ID, that's when you should apply. Please do not apply over the weekend because this system that I'm about to show you won't be live until very early next week. So you guys are getting a sneak preview. Okay, So it talks about what changes we've made. You can click on Start Your Application. It'll give you a little bit of information about what you need to have in front of you. These are all the things that we just talked about. And then you'll click on this 2024 certificate application. And that will bring you to the application. So this is the 24 application for those that have a boat ID. So yes, I have a boat ID. You'll type it in, click automatically fill your boat data. Click next. For privacy reasons, we can't fill in your personal information at this time. So you will have to retype this. If you have a boat representative, so if you have a captain or a crew member that helps you, or if there's a second owner of the boat, this is where you would fill that information in, and we will store it on file for you and include them in the rating process. So this is what the boat ID has powered. It filled in the boat name, the sail number, the boat class, the designer, builder, and year. Please review this data, make sure that everything looks correct. If anything is wrong, you can change it on this screen and we will update it in our system. Okay, so I had an ORC certificate. I'm requesting ORC. I'm going to request an ORC club. I'm going to get a renewal and a standard certificate. If you wanted to, you can request a standard fully crewed and a double-handed certificate and a non-spinnaker all in one application. I'm just going to do a standard to save us some time today. But this is the exact same as it was in 23. Okay. Please read this next section carefully when you fill out your own application. We have added a nice list of things that would potentially cause a boat to get remeasured if your boat is fully measured. I'm going to say, yes, I do have changes. I'm going to pretend like I'm adding a spinnaker pole. So I have a rig measurement change. Here's that list of sails that you need to report that I was referring to earlier. I'm going to add a new sail, and my boat has not been measured since my last certificate. When you get to the crew weight page, if you need a reminder about what default and declared is and maximum and minimum, all of that information is here on the application for you to refer to. So I'm going to say declare a new crew weight. As a reminder, the ORC certificate and the application is all in metric units. So please submit your crew weight in kilograms. And if you submit any changes to us, it needs to be in meters because we do use the metric system for the certificates. I'm going to select my race. I'm going to say I'm doing the Chicago to Mac.
Great choice. Great choice.
Thank you. I'm going to say I dock at Bayview in Detroit. I'm from Michigan. Let's say I sail an E. This information is just for our own internal recording purposes to gather some demographics. Next. So then this is where it asks you about your speed guide. Your first ORC speed guide is $35. If you receive a second configuration, so if you get a double-handed or a non-spinnaker, your second ORC speed guide would be $20 from our office. So I'm going to say yes. and I want fully crewed, and I click submit. So it'll tell me that I have next steps coming to my email. So what that looks like is you get an email like this. Those blue buttons are live links to smaller forms. So I submitted that I had a rig change and a sail change or a sail addition. So I would need to click the rig form and fill in my new spinnaker pole information. And then I would need to click the sail measurement form and submit that new sail that I have. Once both of those components are complete, we would consider that a complete data set. If you are requesting a renewal and you have no changes, you will not have any more links to fill out. You'll get a nice letter saying that we have a complete data set and we'll reach out, if we run into an issue, but you should be good until we send you an invoice. So for reporting changes, if you have new or additional sales, remeasured sales, or if you are replacing a sale same for same that is on your certificate, those all need to be reported to us, and those all get submitted to us via the sale measurement form. That was the link on the prior page. If we require this form or data through this form, it'll be sent to you via email. Same thing for the hull, rig, and propeller measurements. We have a separate form for those measurements this year. And if we require any information from those 3 categories, you will get an email requesting that you fill out the form. So let's walk through really quickly an application for a new boat that does not have a boat ID. So again, you start at the ORC page. We drop down to the bottom. This time we're going to click the new boat application. So again, this is for boats that don't have a boat ID, and you would click this new boat application.
Sydney, can I
Yep.
jump in for
Mhm.
for spinnakers? It feels like most people just list their largest spinnaker. Is that okay? I know this is veering a little bit, but it's
That's okay.
it's a popular topic.
Yep. So under ORC, in terms of spinnakers, we need to have you need to submit your largest spinnaker over 85%. So the mid-width to foot ratio, if it's over 85%, whatever your largest spinnaker is in that category, we need you to report that one. Then if you have any spinnakers that have a mid-width to foot ratio less than 85%, but greater than 75%, all of those sales need to get reported to us. So if you have 3 spinnakers that fall in that category, all of them need to come to us. Additionally, if the mid-width to foot ratio is less than 75%, that and all of those sales also need to come to us. But those go in as flying sales, I believe. So basically anything, my rule of thumb is, or how I think about it, is anything that has a mid-width to foot ratio less than 85%, you need to have measured and sent into our office. So this, I'm going to fill this out as if I'm a new boat. So I've never had a rating before. So no, I am the current owner. So as you can see, this form asks for a little bit more demographic information on the front end. But as you saw, once you have your boat ID, we don't ask for nearly as much data input once you're in the system. So So I'm going to request an ORC. I'll do a club. I'm going to do just a standard. Again, you can request multiple at one time. My boat has not been measured. Again, you have the same crew weight reminder on this one. I'm going to take a default crew weight this time. And again, I'll choose Chicago to mark. So a lot of the information is the same. You just have a little more information to fill in on the front end regarding your boat demographic information is what we call it. So you submit your application, and the next step for this group of boats is you will receive an email from our office in 1 to 2 business days, including your boat ID and any next steps. So if you're a new boat, expect to get a sail measurement form for you to submit your sails. And if you have a custom boat or we need some additional rig or propeller information, we'll also send you that form along with your boat ID, because your boat ID will then power those additional forms. Okay, so if you need an amendment mid-season, that first application that we filled out called the 2024 certificate application, that is the form that you will fill out. You will use your boat ID and you'll follow the same steps. Again, it follows the exact same procedure that we just walked through for a renewal, where if you're submitting changes in the sales category, they will come through that sail measurement form via email following your initial application. For trials, we have created a standalone trial form. That form contains all of the data required to run a trial and is a little more robust in terms of data to submit, but that's just because trials sometimes require more data. This is where the trials application lives. It's on the ORC page underneath the products list, where it talks about what a trial is and how our office fits into running trials for you. You can fill out your sail measurements form, or your sail maker can. So if you have a new spinnaker that you're reporting to us, you can report it using the form that you get an email for, or your sail maker can submit it to us, whichever one you prefer. Okay, so what triggers an amendment? Anytime one of the conditions that requires a remeasurement is triggered, you have to make an amendment to your certificate. Some of those items are sail changes. So if you're adding a new sail type, so if your current certificate doesn't have a code 0 on it and you're going to carry a code 0 for the remainder of your season, that would trigger an amendment. If you're adding a new largest sail, so if you're adding a new main and it's slightly larger than your old main, that would trigger an amendment, and replacing any sails. So if you blow an A2 and your sail maker builds you a new one mid-season, even if it's a same for same change, those new measurements need to be taken and submitted to our office for an amendment. If you have any crew weight changes, so if you're going to be sailing with more crew weight or less crew weight, and it takes you out of that compliance range that we talked about earlier, that would trigger an amendment. Adding and removing powered systems, adding or removing any major configuration changes. So, for example, removing your spinnaker pole, that would be an amendment. And finally, if you have any hull, keel, or rudder changes or modifications. So you take weight out of the keel, you take 6 inches off the rudder. We need to know about all of those things. If you're ever in doubt, ask us. We're happy to help and let you know if it's an amendment or if you're still in compliance with your cert. So once you submit your application, no matter which transaction you're working in, these are the steps that you are going to go through as an owner or a boat representative. So you submit the application. Once all data is sent to our office, so all sail measurements, crew weight, any missing measurements. Once we have everything, we will run what we call a test certificate for you. It's not valid for racing yet, and we ask that you review the certificate. So what does the review process look like? You should check your crew weight. Make sure that we typed it in right. Make sure that it accurately represents what you're going to be sailing, how many people you're going to be sailing with. Make sure that the sails listed are correct and that the measurements that we typed them in correct. You know, get out those sail certificates that you sent us and compare all the numbers. We're human. Sometimes we make a typing error. Make sure that all your rig measurements are correct. Make sure that your boom length makes sense and that your spinnaker pull length is correct. Check the measurement data. So we'll talk about this more in that second measurement presentation, but on the third page, there's a section called flotation and stability. And if your boat has been measured, there's a date on it. Make sure that that date is correct and that it accurately reflects the last date that your boat was measured. Because that'll indicate that the data actually made it into the certificate. And we want to make sure that all of that gets in there. So once you review your certificate, you will approve it. We really appreciate if you send us an email and just say, all good, thanks, okay, just something. And then you pay the invoice. I will make a note, if you pay the invoice and do not give us a yes, you know, it looks good, we take payment as approval and we will issue your certificate once we receive payment. So the next step is we release your certificate to the valid list, and the certificate is then live in the ORC database and valid for racing. And your regatta managers and OAs can pull the certificate into their programs. So if you want to learn more about any of the rules, you can head to each rules page on our US Sailing website. The application links are there, more information about the rule, certificate pricing, and you know, some FAQs on the rule and on the application process. Just one more reminder, please don't fill out your application this weekend. Wait until early next week when we send you that email that says, hey, we're open, come apply, here's your boat ID. That's your green light to go apply next week. Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions?
That was great. There were some great questions in the Q&A, so I highly recommend, you know, if people have a minute, take a look through. And I think a lot of the ones that we hit on more live made a lot of sense because you have application to just about everybody. All right, and with that, do you guys have any other closing points or anything you want to hit on before we start? Oh, that's what we do. That's all we just did. Go out another question.
Well, Kevin, before we get to that, I'd like to thank the 3 clubs for hosting this event.
Oh,
this is a great way for you to get to know us, for us to provide you information, and ultimately to solicit more feedback from you on things that we can do better. So thank you very much.
So I think, Chris, thank you very much, and it's our pleasure. I mean, this is all just to help try to not only grow the rule, but to grow sailing and racing. An anonymous person asked about where you can get a boat weighed in Chicago, and I think we'll be tackling that in the next one because we'll be getting into real measurement. While we're at it, is the data, because I see Chris is typing in an answer to that one, is the data coming out of the VPP, if data coming out of the VPP seems amiss once the test certificate is out, who can we ask for an understanding of what changed? That's a good question.
You can ask our office. So the best way to get an answer is to send an reply back to that email that we send you containing the test certificate. And always be sure to CC or send your email directly to our office email. That's offshore@ussailing.org. That goes to all three of us. And that is your surefire way to get the quickest answer out of somebody. We all monitor that email box all day. But yeah, if you ever have any questions, shoot us an email or give us a call and we'd be happy to take a look at it and talk you through anything. So, or take a second look at data.
There's also a question I'll just answer for everyone here from Keith about the next session, which I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is the 28th of February. All the sessions are at the same time, and they're all going to be webinars. So set your calendars, and we'll have a lot of fun with measurements. From Jason, any reason to apply for an ORC certificate or request one, or request an invite for the race in any particular order?
I don't fully understand the question. In terms of applying, there's really no order. I mean, I would always recommend apply early. I mean, as soon as you know what your configuration is going to be, apply. Is kind of what I err on. If you have, I will note specifically for the boats that are doing the MAC races, if you're going to be making amendments between the two MAC races, so if you're going to do both MAC races and we're dropping a sail or we're changing a crew weight between the two, those things we do need to know early. So if you know in May that you're going to change your crew weight between Bayview and Chicago or vice versa, put in the renewal and then immediately put in an amendment. And just make sure that you label the specific race that you need that configuration for. And we'll always follow up with you to make sure that we understand what you're trying to achieve.
Right, so. And I will chime in on that for Jason and anybody else. I guess there is a little bit to it in terms of timing, in that if you have particular options to your configuration, crew weight, sails you're carrying, etc. Pardon me. And at least from the Chicago to Mackinac race, as part of the ratings group, I can tell you, if you appear to be trying to obtain a certificate close to race time in order to perhaps maximize your ability once you know the weather outlook, race organizers are not going to look kindly upon that. So if you say, oh, it looks like it's not going to blow, pardon me, so I'm going to carry less crew weight, etc. That's a no-no. So I would just chime in with sitting there. Yeah, have your certificate in early and sail by.
Yep. And always check your NOR, because usually they have a deadline of your data needs to be into US sailing by X date, and it's usually to help curb some of that weather optimization things and stuff like that. So
Kevin, if I can partially answer that as well. There's always optimization, but for those of our audience who are coming from a PHRF environment where it's a single number, you should know that a VPP is sensitive to things like the size of sails, the weight of your crew, differently in different conditions. So the size of your largest jib doesn't really matter in heavy wind, because the VPP will be using a smaller version of your sail plan in conditions where it wants to depower. So just to repeat myself, yes, you can maybe get some little advantage out of an optimization or a choice like that, but it's far less than a rule that is ignorant of those kinds of things. And the ORC VPP is pretty smart about dealing with that.
Perhaps final question from Tim Crawford and David. One more question: what determines the head sail limit? Now we're getting into not so much the VPP, but the ORC rules. Vote I race against, if it's similar, is allowed 6. I'm allowed 5.
So under ORC, it's set in the ORC rule book. Chris may need to correct me, but I believe it's set by CDL or LOA. It has a range.
It is set by CDL, and there
Yeah.
are various buckets.
Yeah.
of
If you go to the ORC, Tim, if you want to dive into it more, if you go to the ORC like website, orc.org, and you look at their rules and regulations, if you open the current year rules and regulations, it's listed in there, specifically as a rule, and it shows you the little chart of boats in this range get this, and boats in this range get this limits. So.
And then always check your NORs, because that is something that can easily be
Yes.
modified by your OA. Unless we do it.
Yeah.
I think we can wrap this evening on it. Thank the 3 of you. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm fighting off the cold. Jim, Chris, and Sydney, for taking the time digging into this. I'm sure some of these questions, you probably heard a million times, but you may very well have to answer them a million more. I know I certainly learned some more, and I've dug into this a lot myself. So thank you for your time. I hope we all get to be a little more knowledgeable and just learn to understand and use the world a little bit better. With that, I'm going to sign off and look forward to seeing everybody on, again, the 28th, same time. There was a question. It should be a different link. Zoom requires, a different time, different meeting, that it will be a different link, but we will make sure to get that out. And the plan is to send out the deck to everyone. So everybody that had to sign in this evening with an email address, that won't go to waste. All right. Thank you, guys. Good night.